My wife didn't cheat in secret. She seated him at the head of the table and called me insecure for noticing. The candle wax had been dripping onto our white tablecloth for 20 minutes before anyone acknowledged it. I watched the pooling amber spread toward the edge, threatening to spill over onto Jennifer's lap, but she was too busy laughing at something David said to notice. Her boss, the man currently occupying the chair I'd sat in for every birthday dinner we'd hosted in the past 6 years. "Tom, could you grab more wine from the kitchen?" Jennifer didn't look at me when she asked. Her eyes stayed fixed on David's face, tracking his expression like she was waiting for approval that never came. I stood without answering, navigating around the chairs wedged too close together in our dining room. When we'd moved into this house, Jennifer insisted we needed a table that could seat 8. For entertaining, she'd said, for building our network. 3 years later, and tonight was the first time we'd filled every chair, the kitchen offered temporary refuge. I pulled another bottle from the rack, twisted the corkscrew with more force than necessary, and listened to the conversation bleeding through the doorway. "David was telling us about the Singapore expansion," Amanda said. She was Jennifer's college roommate, someone who'd perfected the art of amplifying whatever Jennifer wanted to hear. "Sounds like the company is really betting big on international growth." "We're positioning ourselves strategically," David replied. His voice carried that rehearsed quality of someone used to giving presentations. "The Asian market represents significant opportunities for firms willing to invest in cultural adaptation." I returned to find Jennifer leaning forward, her elbows on the table in a way she'd normally criticize as improper. "David's been instrumental in developing the market entry strategy," she announced, like she was introducing a keynote speaker. "The board specifically requested his expertise." "How long have you been with the firm?" I asked, filling glasses around the table. David accepted his wine with a nod that somehow conveyed both gratitude and dismissal. "Coming up on 18 months, Jennifer's been an invaluable resource in helping me understand the company culture." "She's good at that," I said. "Understanding culture." The comment landed without impact. Jennifer shot me a look that promised we'd discuss my tone later, then redirected the conversation toward David's previous position in Boston. I settled back into my displaced chair at the far end of the table and watched the dynamics play out like a stage production I hadn't auditioned for. Amanda's husband, Kevin, was doing his best to engage David in conversation about golf, a topic that seemed to bore David almost as much as it bored me. Jennifer kept interjecting with anecdotes from the office, stories I'd never heard despite asking about her day every evening for the past 8 years. "Remember when the printer caught fire during the quarterly review?" Jennifer said, touching David's arm. David managed to salvage the entire presentation by pivoting to a digital display in under 5 minutes. David smiled with practiced modesty. "Just problem solving under pressure. Nothing heroic." "It saved the account," Jennifer insisted. "Mr. Patterson was ready to walk." I found myself studying David's reactions. He had the kind of face that belonged in corporate headshots, professionally handsome but forgettable. His responses were smooth but generic, the verbal equivalent of elevator music. And there was something else, something that nagged at me like a splinter I couldn't locate. "What floor are you on?" I asked during a lull in the conversation. David blinked at me. "Sorry?" "At the office. Jennifer's on the 7th floor. I was wondering if you're in the same building or if the expansion team got moved to the new location." Jennifer's fork clinked against her plate harder than necessary. "David's department spans multiple floors, Tom. It's not really organized that way anymore." "Right," I said. "Makes sense." But it didn't make sense. Not entirely. Jennifer had complained for months about the 7th floor coffee maker being broken, about having to take the elevator down to 6 just to get decent coffee. She'd mentioned it so often I'd bought her an espresso machine for Christmas. Yet David, her supposed direct supervisor, seemed uncertain about basic office geography. The dinner crawled forward. Dessert appeared, a chocolate cake Jennifer had ordered from the bakery she claimed was too expensive for regular occasions. David praised it effusively. Amanda seconded every compliment. Kevin checked his phone under the table, and I sat there, cataloging inconsistencies I couldn't yet name. "Tom's been handling some interesting cases lately," Jennifer said, her voice carrying that false brightness people use when changing uncomfortable subjects. "Tell David about the Johnson merger." "I don't think David wants to hear about contract law," I replied. "Actually, I'd be interested," David said. "Jennifer mentioned you work in corporate litigation." The fact that Jennifer had discussed me with David should have felt normal. Spouses talked about each other. But something in the way he said it, the slight pause before corporate litigation, suggested he was retrieving information rather than recalling a casual conversation. I gave him the abbreviated version of a case that was public record anyway, watching his face for genuine interest. He nodded at appropriate intervals, asked a follow-up question that sounded intelligent, but revealed no actual understanding of the legal principles involved, and concluded with a generic statement about the complexity of modern business law. "Jennifer says you're up for partners soon," David offered. "She's optimistic," I said. "The firm hasn't made any promises." "Tom's being modest," Jennifer cut in. "His billable hours last year were in the top 15%. The senior partners have definitely noticed." This was true. It was also true that Jennifer had never expressed particular interest in my billable hours before, had in fact complained when I worked late, accused me of prioritizing the firm over our relationship. Hearing her brag about my performance to David felt like watching someone praise a car they were planning to sell. The evening finally wound down around 11. Amanda and Kevin left first, Amanda hugging Jennifer with drunken enthusiasm and whispering something that made Jennifer laugh. David lingered, helping clear plates in a way that seemed more performative than helpful. "Thanks for having me," he said, shaking my hand at the door. "Jennifer talks about you all the time. It's good to finally meet you." "Likewise," I lied. Jennifer walked him to his car. Through the window, I watched them stand by his sedan, talking for another 10 minutes. Her body language was animated, hands gesturing in ways I recognized from when she was excited about something. He mostly listened, nodding occasionally, his posture suggesting polite attention rather than engagement. When she came back inside, I was loading the dishwasher. "That went well," she said, slipping off her heels. "Everyone seemed to have a good time." "David seems nice," I offered. "He's brilliant," Jennifer corrected. "The firm recruited him specifically for the expansion project. We're lucky to have someone with his background." "What's his background exactly?" She paused, wineglass halfway to the sink. "International business development. He ran the European division for his previous company." "Why?" "Just curious. You talk about him a lot, but I realized I don't know much about his actual experience." "I talk about work, Tom. He's my boss. Of course his name comes up." The defensiveness arrived faster than the explanation. I filed that away, too. "I'm just saying, it's interesting that someone with international experience would take a position at a mid-sized firm in Ohio," I continued, keeping my tone casual. "Usually people at that level are in New York or San Francisco." Jennifer's jaw tightened in a way I'd learned to recognize over 8 years of marriage. "Not everyone measures success by coastal zip codes. Some people value different things." "Sure," I said. "Makes sense." I finished loading the dishwasher while Jennifer retreated upstairs. The conversation was over, dismissed as easily as my earlier comment about culture. But I couldn't dismiss the feeling that had been building all evening, the sense that I was watching a performance where everyone knew their lines except me. Later, lying in bed while Jennifer scrolled through her phone, I replayed the dinner in my mind. The seating arrangement, the inside jokes that David didn't laugh at. The way Jennifer had touched his arm, a casual gesture she hadn't directed at me in months. The inconsistencies in his responses about the office, about his role, about things that should have been automatic knowledge for someone who'd been there 18 months. "Did you move David's place card?" I asked into the darkness. "What?" Jennifer didn't look up from her screen. "At dinner, when I was in the kitchen. Did you move his seat to the head of the table?" "Tom, I'm tired. Can we not do this right now?" "Do what?" "This thing where you pick apart a perfectly nice evening because you're feeling insecure?" There it was, the word I'd been waiting for since the moment David sat in my chair. Insecure. The universal dismissal, the conversation ender, the accusation that made any further questions seem petty and pathetic. "I'm not insecure," I said. "I'm observant." "You're exhausting," Jennifer replied, setting her phone on the nightstand with deliberate finality. David was gracious enough to attend a dinner party with people he doesn't know, and instead of appreciating that he made an effort, you're interrogating me about place cards. I asked one question. "You've been asking questions all night. I could see it in your face, the way you were watching him, analyzing everything he said. It's embarrassing, Tom. You're my husband, not a jealous boyfriend." The argument she was constructing didn't match the conversation we were having. I'd asked about a chair. She was defending against accusations I hadn't made. The gap between stimulus and response was telling. "I'm going to sleep," I said. Jennifer turned off her lamp without responding. Within minutes, her breathing settled into the rhythm of sleep, or a convincing imitation of it. I lay awake for another hour, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the small inconsistencies that didn't quite add up to proof, but didn't add up to coincidence either. The next morning, Jennifer was already gone when I woke up. A note on the kitchen counter explained she had an early meeting, one she hadn't mentioned the night before. I made coffee and sat at the table where David had held court. where the candle wax had finally hardened into an irregular amber pool that Jennifer hadn't bothered to clean. I scraped it off with a butter knife, revealing the pale rectangle of tablecloth underneath that had been protected from months of sun exposure. The outline reminded me of a crime scene chalk mark, a body removed but its shape remaining as evidence of what had been there. That's when I decided not to confront her. Not yet. Confrontation required evidence, and evidence required patience. I'd built a career on discovering what people tried to hide in contracts, in depositions, in carefully worded emails that said one thing and meant another. I knew how to read between lines, how to follow paper trails, how to build a case that couldn't be dismissed as insecurity or imagination. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note. At the top, I typed a single question. When did David actually start working at the firm? Then I began my inventory. The closet revealed itself in layers. At first glance, everything seemed normal, the expected accumulation of a professional woman's wardrobe. But I'd lived with Jennifer long enough to recognize anomalies, and that Saturday morning, while she was at her supposed yoga class, the anomalies practically announced themselves. 3 blouses I'd never seen her wear hung at the back, tags still attached. The brands weren't ones she normally bought, weren't available at the department stores she frequented. I checked the labels. Nordstrom. The nearest location was 40 minutes away, in a direction opposite from her office, from our house, from anywhere she'd mentioned going in recent months. I photographed the tags with my phone, careful to capture the dates on the receipts I found crumpled in the shoebox beneath them. Purchased 6 weeks ago on a Tuesday. Jennifer's calendar, the one we shared, showed a late meeting that day. The credit card statement, when I checked it later, showed no Nordstrom purchase, which meant either she'd paid cash, something Jennifer never did for purchases over $20, or she'd used an account I didn't know about. The gym bag appeared next, shoved behind winter coats we hadn't needed since March. Jennifer had joined a fitness center 2 months earlier, part of what she'd called a commitment to better health. I'd supported it, even though the membership cost more than our previous gym combined with a personal trainer. She'd explained that the facility had better equipment, more diverse classes, a pool she planned to use for low-impact cardio. I unzipped the bag. Inside, workout clothes that looked worn, a water bottle, a lock for a locker, and underneath it all, a smell I didn't recognize. Not quite cologne, not quite aftershave, something chemical and synthetic that definitely didn't come from Jennifer. I held the fabric of her workout shirt to my nose, trying to place the scent. It wasn't sweat. It wasn't laundry detergent. It was foreign, intrusive, wrong. The protein powder sat on the shelf in our bathroom, an enormous container she'd brought home 3 weeks ago. Jennifer had never expressed interest in supplements before, had in fact rolled her eyes when I'd tried various brands during a brief fitness phase 2 years earlier. But suddenly she was drinking protein shakes every morning, claiming her trainer recommended them for recovery. I unscrewed the lid. The powder looked untouched, a perfectly smooth surface that suggested the container had never been opened except for the initial seal breaking. If she'd been using it daily for 3 weeks, there should have been a depression, a scoop mark, something to indicate regular use. I pushed my hand down into the powder, feeling for the scoop that usually came with these containers. My fingers hit plastic 4 inches down. Not a scoop. Something rectangular wrapped in a Ziploc bag. I pulled it out, brushed off the powder, and discovered a phone I'd never seen before. Burner phones weren't exactly rare. Plenty of people had legitimate reasons for secondary devices. But Jennifer had never mentioned needing one, had never expressed concerns about privacy or security that would justify this kind of setup. And the fact that it was hidden, buried in a product she wasn't actually using, suggested its purpose wasn't legitimate. I powered it on. No password, which struck me as either arrogant or careless. The screen loaded to reveal a sparse interface. No apps beyond the basics, no personal customization. Just a phone app, messages, and a calendar. The calendar opened to show entries going back 3 months. Dates, times, locations. Nothing descriptive, no names, just abbreviations that meant nothing to me. RH 3 p.m. DT 6:30. MS lunch. The pattern suggested recurring appointments, the kind of schedule someone would keep for regular obligations. I cross-referenced the dates with Jennifer's work calendar, the one she shared with me. Every single entry on the burner phone corresponded to a day she'd marked as having late meetings, client dinners, or weekend work sessions. Every single one. The messages were minimal, mostly confirmations. See you then. Running 10 minutes late. Same place as last time. No names, no context, nothing that would identify the sender or reveal the nature of the meetings. But one thread caught my attention, a conversation from 2 weeks ago. Can't make Thursday, family thing came up. No problem. Friday instead? Friday works, usual time. I checked Jennifer's calendar for that Thursday. She'd marked it as a late meeting with a client. But according to this phone, the meeting had been canceled, which meant either she'd forgotten to update our shared calendar or she'd deliberately left the fake meeting in place to maintain her cover story. I photographed every screen, every message, every calendar entry. Then I buried the phone back in the protein powder, smoothed the surface to match what I'd found, and replaced the container exactly where it had been. The apartment felt different after that. Every object became potential evidence, every drawer a possible hiding place. I moved through the space like an archaeologist, careful not to disturb anything while documenting everything. The receipts in her car, crumpled in the cup holder, showing gas purchases from stations nowhere near her usual routes. The credit card I found in her desk drawer, embossed with her name, but from a bank we didn't use. The dry cleaning ticket for a dress I'd never seen her wear. Each discovery was small, individually meaningless, but together they formed a pattern, a parallel life running alongside the one I thought we shared. I created a spreadsheet, logging dates and locations and expenses, watching the timeline take shape. Jennifer came home from yoga glowing, energized in a way I hadn't seen in months. She kissed my cheek, asked about my morning, started telling me about a challenging pose her instructor had introduced. I listened, responding at appropriate moments, playing the role of attentive husband while my mind cataloged the inconsistency of someone attending yoga with a gym bag that smelled like someone else. I was thinking we could try that new restaurant downtown tonight, she suggested, pulling vegetables from the refrigerator. The Italian place everyone's been talking about. Sure, I said. Sounds good. We hadn't been to a nice restaurant together in weeks. The sudden invitation felt performative, like she was checking a box labeled normal married behavior. I wondered if guilt prompted these gestures, or if they were strategic, ways to maintain the façade while she dismantled our life from the inside. Dinner was pleasant, almost aggressively so. Jennifer talked about work projects in vague terms, asked about my cases with what seemed like genuine interest, laughed at my stories about the quirky senior partner who insisted on dictating memos to his secretary despite owning a computer. We could have been any couple, enjoying a Saturday evening, celebrating nothing in particular. This is nice, Jennifer said, reaching across the table to take my hand. We should do this more often. We should, I agreed. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled, then flipped it face down on the table. Work can wait, she announced. But I'd seen the notification, just a glimpse before she'd hidden it. Not a work email, a text message, from a contact saved only as a single letter. D. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, just someone confirming Monday's meeting. She squeezed my hand. I'm trying to be better about boundaries. No work during our time together. The irony of her talking about boundaries while hiding a burner phone buried in protein powder would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. I squeezed back, smiled, and signaled the waiter for another bottle of wine. Over the next week, I refined my surveillance. Not following her, not yet. Just watching patterns, noting departures from routine. She started showering as soon as she got home from the gym, when she used to shower before leaving. Her laundry habits changed, washing her own clothes separately instead of combining loads like we'd always done. She bought new lingerie, pieces I never saw her wear around the house. The trainer at her gym was named Michael, according to the website. I called, pretending to be interested in membership, asked about his availability for new clients. The receptionist cheerfully informed me that Michael's schedule was completely full, had been for months, and there was a waiting list if I wanted to be added. When I asked if he took clients on Tuesday evenings, she laughed and said Michael didn't work Tuesdays at all. Jennifer had been coming home from the gym on Tuesday evenings for the past 6 weeks, talking about her sessions with Michael, describing exercises he'd taught her, quoting his advice on nutrition and recovery. All of it fiction, all of it crafted to explain time spent somewhere else, with someone else. I started checking the burner phone weekly, always on Saturday mornings when Jennifer was reliably gone for 3 hours. The pattern remained consistent, appointments scheduled, confirmations exchanged, no identifying information. But the calendar entries were increasing in frequency, evolving from once or twice a week to nearly daily occurrences. One entry stood out. DT overnight. Scheduled for 2 weeks from now, on a Wednesday. I checked Jennifer's shared calendar. She'd blocked off Thursday and Friday as a work trip, a conference in Chicago that her company was supposedly sending her to attend. I called the firm's main line on Monday, asked the receptionist if she could help me find information about the Chicago conference several employees were attending next month. She put me on hold, came back confused, explained that there was no conference scheduled, that the company hadn't planned any Chicago trips for the quarter. Are you sure? I pressed. My wife mentioned it several times. She's in the International Development Division. Let me check with that department, the receptionist offered. She transferred me to a different line. A woman answered, identified herself as Lynn from Human Resources. I'm trying to confirm details about a conference in Chicago, I explained, keeping my voice casual, confused rather than suspicious. My wife Jennifer is supposed to attend, but I'm having trouble finding the booking information in our shared calendar. Jennifer in international development? Lynn asked. That's right. Hold on, let me pull up the travel authorizations. Papers rustled in the background. I'm not seeing anything scheduled for Chicago. When did she say this was? I gave her the dates. Nothing here, Lynn confirmed. And actually, our international development team doesn't typically attend external conferences. Most of their work is internal strategy sessions. Is it possible she meant a different event? Maybe I misunderstood, I said. She's been so busy lately. Details get mixed up. Thanks for checking. I hung up before Lynn could offer to investigate further. The lie was confirmed, documented, undeniable. Jennifer wasn't going to Chicago for work. She was going somewhere with someone, using company business as cover for a trip that had nothing to do with corporate strategy. The burner phone became my focus. I started checking it more frequently, careful to return everything exactly as I'd found it. The messages remained minimal, frustratingly vague. But then, 3 days before the supposed Chicago trip, a new thread appeared. Excited for Wednesday? Me too. Been looking forward to this. Same hotel as before? Confirmed the reservation yesterday. Corner room, view of the river. River. Chicago had a river, but so did dozens of other cities. The message didn't specify which river, which hotel, which city they were actually planning to visit. I scrolled through earlier messages, looking for clues, finding nothing concrete. Then I noticed something I'd missed before. The timestamps on the messages didn't align with Jennifer's usual schedule. Messages sent at 2 in the afternoon when she should have been at work. Responses coming in at 9 at night when she was supposedly asleep beside me. The pattern suggested she had the phone with her constantly, keeping it close enough to respond immediately, hiding it somewhere I'd never think to look. I checked her purse. Nothing. Her car. Nothing. Her desk at home. Nothing. The phone stayed buried in protein powder between my Saturday morning checks, which meant she had another one, a second burner, the one she actually carried. The powder-buried phone was either a backup or a decoy, something to discover if I went looking, while the real communication happened on a device I hadn't found yet. The sophistication of the deception impressed me in a detached way. This wasn't careless cheating, wasn't leaving hotel receipts in pockets, or forgetting to delete text messages. This was planned, layered, the kind of operational security someone employed when they knew they were doing something worth hiding. On Tuesday evening, Jennifer came home from her not-real gym session and announced she needed to pack for Chicago. The conference starts Thursday morning, she explained, pulling her suitcase from the closet. I'll drive up Wednesday afternoon, get settled in the hotel, review my presentation materials. You're presenting? I asked. Just a small panel discussion, she said. Nothing major. Industry trends, market analysis, the usual corporate stuff. I watched her pack. Professional outfits, appropriate for conferences. But also the new lingerie, the unworn blouses with Nordstrom tags, a dress I'd never seen that looked more suitable for dinner than corporate panels. How long will you be gone? I asked. Back Friday evening. I'll text you when I'm leaving the hotel. Sounds good. I'll miss you. She smiled, kissed me briefly, and continued packing. Her phone buzzed. She checked it, typed a response, set it down. D was confirming details, I assumed, making sure the corner room was ready, the river view secured, the stage set for their Wednesday overnight stay in whatever city they were actually visiting. That night, while Jennifer slept, I took her car keys from her purse and drove to her gym. The parking lot was empty at 1 in the morning, security lights casting orange pools across the asphalt. I installed the dashcam I'd purchased earlier that week, a small device that mounted behind the rearview mirror and recorded continuously whenever the car was running. The installation took 15 minutes. I tested it, verified the footage was recording clearly, then drove back home and replaced the keys before Jennifer woke up. By Wednesday afternoon, I'd have documentation of everywhere her car went, everyone she met, every location she visited during her supposed trip to Chicago. Wednesday morning arrived. Jennifer left for work at her normal time, promising to text me when she was on the road. I went to my office, logged a few hours on a brief I was drafting, then told my assistant I was working from home for the rest of the day. The dashcam footage streamed to my phone through an app. I watched Jennifer drive from our house to her office, park in her assigned spot, disappear into the building. 3 hours later, she emerged, got back in the car, and started driving. Not north toward Chicago. South, toward the interstate that led to Cincinnati. I followed the route on my phone, watching the roads pass in real time through the windshield-mounted camera. She drove for 90 minutes, finally exiting at a small town I'd never heard of, pulling into the parking lot of a hotel I'd definitely never heard of. The Riverside Inn, budget accommodations, the kind of place that didn't ask questions and didn't keep detailed records. The timestamp on the video read 2:47 p.m. Jennifer sat in her parked car for 6 minutes. At 2:53, another vehicle pulled into the lot, a silver sedan, parking directly next to hers. A man got out, walked to Jennifer's passenger door, leaned in through the window. I couldn't see his face clearly from the dash cam angle, but I could see Jennifer's expression, the smile that transformed her face in a way I hadn't inspired in months. They talked for another minute, then both got out and walked into the hotel together. The dashcam continued recording the empty parking lot for the next 3 hours, documenting nothing but afternoon shadows lengthening across the asphalt. At 6:15 p.m., Jennifer emerged alone, got in her car, and drove home. She texted me at 6:20, a message claiming she'd arrived safely in Chicago and was checking into her hotel. I responded with a thumbs-up emoji, then watched the dashcam footage of her pulling into our driveway at 7:05 p.m. She came through the door carrying her suitcase, looking tired in a way that seemed performative. "How was the drive?" I asked from the couch. "Long," she said. "Traffic was terrible getting into the city. I'm exhausted." "You should rest. Big day tomorrow." "Yeah." She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else, then just shook her head and headed upstairs. I sat there, listening to the shower running, the water that was supposed to wash away road trip fatigue but was actually washing away evidence of a 3-hour afternoon in a budget hotel. My phone held the footage, time-stamped and geotagged, proving every lie she'd constructed. The burner phone calendar had been accurate after all. DT overnight. Except the overnight hadn't happened yet. She'd come home to maintain appearances, to send texts from our house that would show her location, to sleep next to me while pretending she was in Chicago. Which meant the actual overnight was scheduled for later. Tomorrow probably, when she could claim to be attending the non-existent conference when I wouldn't expect her home until Friday evening. I pulled up the dashcam app and enabled continuous monitoring. Whatever happened tomorrow, wherever she actually went, I'd have documentation. Not just suspicions anymore. Not just inconsistencies. Actual proof, recorded and irrefutable, of exactly who my wife had become when she thought no one was watching. Thursday morning unfolded with Jennifer performing the routine of someone attending a conference. She woke up early, dressed in one of the professional outfits from her suitcase, spent 20 minutes on makeup she normally reserved for important meetings. I watched from bed, pretending to be half asleep, noting every detail. "I'll text you when the morning panels are done," she said, kissing my forehead. "Probably won't be until lunch. Good luck with your presentation." "Thanks." She paused at the door. "Love you." "Love you too." The words felt like reading lines from a script we'd both memorized but no longer believed in. She left, her footsteps descending the stairs, the front door closing with practiced quietness. I waited 5 minutes, then pulled up the dashcam feed on my phone. Jennifer drove to her office again, parked, went inside. This time she emerged 40 minutes later carrying a different bag, smaller than the suitcase, the kind of overnight bag someone would use for a romantic getaway rather than a business trip. She got in her car, pulled onto the interstate, and headed south again. Same route as yesterday, same exit, same hotel. The dashcam captured her parking in a spot 2 rows back from where she'd been the day before, the lot more crowded now in mid-morning. She sat in her car, checking her phone, her expression shifting from neutral to anticipatory. At 10:23 a.m., the silver sedan appeared again. Same car, same parking spot next to hers. The man got out, and this time the dashcam caught his face clearly as he walked around to Jennifer's door. Not David. Someone younger. Different build, different features. Someone I'd never seen before. They went inside together. The dashcam recorded the empty lot, the comings and goings of other guests, the steady passage of time. I set my phone aside and stared at the ceiling, processing what I'd confirmed. The affair wasn't with David. David had been a prop, a decoy, someone Jennifer could talk about openly to disguise the person she was actually seeing. Bringing him to dinner had been strategic, a way to direct my suspicions towards someone she could explain away as a professional relationship while the real relationship continued invisibly. I picked up my office phone and dialed the main number for Jennifer's firm. The receptionist answered with practiced cheerfulness. "This is Thomas Reeves," I said. "I'm Jennifer Reeves's husband. I'm trying to reach her for a family emergency, but her cell phone is going straight to voicemail. Could you transfer me to her extension?" "Of course, one moment." The line clicked, rang 4 times, then rolled to Jennifer's voicemail. Her recorded voice asked me to leave a message. She must be away from her desk. the receptionist said, coming back on the line. Would you like to leave a message with me? Actually, could you check if David is available? He's her supervisor. He might know where she is today. David? The receptionist paused. I'm sorry. Which David are you referring to? David in International Development. I don't know his last name, but he's been working with Jennifer on the Singapore expansion. Let me transfer you to that department. Lynn from HR answered again. I recognized her voice from my previous call about the Chicago conference. Hi, Lynn. This is Thomas Reeves again. I'm trying to reach Jennifer, but I was also hoping to speak with her supervisor, David. The receptionist wasn't sure who I meant. David, Lynn repeated slowly. In International Development. You know, that's interesting. We don't actually have anyone named David in that department currently. Are you sure? Jennifer talks about him constantly. He's been with the firm for about 18 months. We had a David Thompson in that division, Lynn said, but he transferred to our Atlanta office 6 months ago, took a regional director position. Is it possible Jennifer was referring to work she did with him before he left? My chest tightened. 6 months ago. That's right. He left in June. Great guy. We were sorry to lose him. But the promotion was too good to pass up. Of course, I managed. I must have misunderstood the timeline. Thanks for checking. I hung up before she could ask more questions. The timeline Jennifer had constructed was completely fabricated. David had left in June. Jennifer had been talking about him constantly since July, bringing him to dinner in September, using him as explanation for late meetings and weekend work sessions. She'd been lying about David specifically because she knew I couldn't easily verify the truth. Couldn't casually check up on someone's employment status without raising suspicions. Except I could verify it. I just had. And now I knew that everything Jennifer had said about work for the past 3 months was fiction. The promotion she'd mentioned, the Singapore expansion, the team projects, all of it constructed to explain time spent somewhere else. I opened my banking app and logged into our joint checking account. The balance looked normal, matching what I'd expected based on our usual spending patterns. But when I scrolled through recent transactions, I noticed something odd. Several transfers to our savings account, amounts ranging from $500 to $2,000, initiated by Jennifer over the past 2 months. I checked the savings account. The balance was significantly lower than it should have been. The deposits appeared, then withdrawals of matching amounts a few days later. Money coming in, money going out, creating the illusion of savings while actually funneling cash somewhere else. I called our bank, asked to speak with someone about joint account management. I'm reviewing our account activity, I explained to the representative who answered. I'm seeing some transfers that I don't remember authorizing. Can you tell me if both account holders need to approve transfers above a certain amount? For your account type, either party can initiate transfers independently, she said. Is there a specific transaction you're concerned about? Several, actually. Large withdrawals from savings over the past 2 months. Can you tell me where that money went? Keyboard clicks filled the pause. The withdrawals were processed as cash withdrawals, sir, taken at branch locations. Which branches? More clicking. Multiple locations, some in your city, others in neighboring towns. The largest withdrawal, $4,000, was processed in Dayton last month. Dayton. 90 minutes south, close enough to the Riverside Inn to make the geography relevant. Jennifer had driven to Dayton, withdrawn $4,000 in cash, and presumably spent it on something she didn't want appearing on credit card statements. Thank you, I said. One more question. If I wanted to restructure our accounts, require dual authorization for large transfers, what would that process involve? You'd need to come into a branch with proper identification, she explained. We'd set up new signature requirements, establish thresholds, and both account holders would need to sign the updated agreements. Both account holders. That's correct, sir. Changes to joint accounts require consent from all parties. I thanked her and ended the call. The limitation was clear. I couldn't unilaterally protect our assets without Jennifer's cooperation, which she'd never provide if she knew what I was planning, which meant I needed a different approach. Over lunch, I drove to a different bank across town, one where Jennifer and I had no existing accounts. I opened a personal checking account in my name only, transferred the minimum required deposit, and requested information about their account features. The banker, a friendly woman in her 50s, walked me through options for direct deposit, online bill pay, and automatic savings transfers. Can you help me understand the difference between joint and individual accounts in terms of legal protection? I asked. Individual accounts are solely in your name, she explained. Only you have access. Only you can authorize transactions. Joint accounts require all parties to consent to closure or major changes, but any party can access or withdraw funds. So if I had a joint account somewhere else, my spouse could empty it without my permission. Legally, yes, it's considered shared property. Both parties have equal rights to the full balance. I thanked her for the information and left with account documentation that I locked in my desk drawer at work. The account would sit dormant for now, waiting for the moment when I needed somewhere to move money that Jennifer couldn't touch. The dashcam showed Jennifer's car still parked at the Riverside Inn, 3 hours so far. I wondered what they were doing, what stories they told themselves to justify the deception, what promises they made that they probably both knew were temporary. Affairs burned hot and fast, consuming everything until nothing remained but ash and regret. I just needed to make sure Jennifer was the only one who got burned. My phone rang, Jennifer's number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey," I said. "Hey, just checking in during lunch break. The morning panels were interesting. How's your day going?" "Quiet. Working on the Morrison brief. Missing you." "Miss you too." Background noise filtered through the call. Voices and movement that could have been a conference center or could have been a television playing in a hotel room. "I should get back. Afternoon sessions start in 10 minutes. Good luck. Love you." "Love you." She hung up. I checked the dash cam. Her car hadn't moved. The timestamp read 1:47 p.m. The afternoon sessions she was supposedly attending didn't exist, just like the morning panels, just like the entire Chicago conference. She was lying to me from a hotel room 90 minutes away, lying with the ease of someone who'd practiced enough that it came naturally. I spent the afternoon drafting documents, not legal briefs, not client correspondence, documents for myself, a timeline of Jennifer's deceptions, cross-referenced with dates and evidence, a list of shared assets, from the house to bank accounts to retirement funds, a preliminary budget estimating what I'd need to live independently, numbers that looked manageable until I factored in legal fees, which could run anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000, depending on how contentious Jennifer decided to make things. The dashcam sent an alert at 5:34 p.m. Jennifer's car was moving. I watched her drive back to our house, park in the driveway, grab her overnight bag from the passenger seat. She came through the front door looking appropriately tired. The performance of someone who'd spent a full day in conference rooms rather than hotel rooms. "How was it?" I asked. "Exhausting," she said, setting her bag down. "But productive. Made some good connections. How was your afternoon?" "Fine. Got a lot of work done without distractions." She smiled, kicked off her shoes, headed upstairs. I heard the shower start, the ritual cleaning that had become routine after her supposed gym sessions, her supposed late meetings, her supposed business trips, water to wash away evidence, to reset her appearance, to prepare for the next performance. My phone buzzed, an email from my assistant reminding me about a client meeting tomorrow morning. I confirmed my attendance, then opened a new email to my lawyer. Not the lawyer who handled my corporate work, but the one I'd researched specifically for family law, someone with a reputation for aggressive representation and discretion. The email was brief. "Need to schedule a consultation regarding potential divorce proceedings. Prefer to meet outside of normal business hours for privacy reasons. Please advise your availability." The response came within 20 minutes. "Available tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. at my office. Please bring any relevant financial documentation and a summary of concerns." I confirmed the appointment, then deleted the email thread and cleared my browser history. Jennifer thought she was the one with secrets, the one managing parallel lives. But I'd learned from watching her. Deception required attention to detail, consistent stories, and most importantly, understanding that the truth was whatever you could prove. Tomorrow, I'd start building proof that would hold up in court. Tonight, I'd sit across the dinner table from my wife and pretend we were still playing the same game. Jennifer ordered takeout from the Thai place we both liked. We ate on the couch, watching a show neither of us cared about, making occasional comments about plot developments that didn't matter. She curled against me during a commercial break, her head on my shoulder, her breathing steady and familiar. "I'm glad I'm home," she said quietly. "Me too. Tomorrow's the last day of the conference. I'll be back by dinner." "Sounds good. I'll pick up groceries, make something nice." "Perfect." She squeezed my hand. "I know I've been distracted lately with work being so intense, but I want you to know I appreciate you being patient with me." The audacity of the statement stunned me into silence. She was apologizing for being distracted while actively conducting an affair, thanking me for patience while lying about her location, her colleagues, her entire professional life. The cognitive dissonance required to deliver those lines with apparent sincerity suggested either sociopathy or such deep self-deception that she actually believed her own narrative. "We all have busy periods," I said. "I understand." She kissed my cheek and returned her attention to the television. I sat there, feeling the weight of her against me, wondering when the person I'd married had become someone capable of this level of betrayal, or if she'd always been this person and I'd just been too trusting to notice. Friday morning, Jennifer left early, claiming she wanted to attend the conference's opening keynote before her afternoon panel. I watched the dashcam feed as she drove to her office, went inside for 30 minutes, then emerged and drove south again. The pattern was consistent now, predictable. Office for appearances, then the Riverside Inn for whatever she and her companion had convinced themselves they were building. The lawyer's office occupied the third floor of a building downtown, accessible through a discreet entrance around back. I arrived at 6 p.m. carrying a folder containing bank statements, the timeline I'd constructed, and printed screenshots from the burner phone. Attorney Walsh was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd heard every story and believed none of them without evidence. She gestured to a chair across from her desk and opened a legal pad. "Tell me what's happening," she said. I laid out the facts. The dinner with David, the inconsistencies in Jennifer's stories, the burner phone, the fake conference, the dashcam footage. Walsh took notes, asking occasional questions about dates, amounts, specific conversations. When I finished, she sat back and reviewed her notes in silence. "The affair itself isn't particularly relevant to the legal proceedings," she finally said. "Ohio is a no-fault divorce state, but the financial deception is significant. Withdrawing cash, hiding accounts, those actions demonstrate intent to conceal assets. Can we prevent her from emptying our joint accounts? Not easily. She has legal access to those funds. But we can document everything, establish a pattern of financial deception, and use that in asset division negotiations." Walsh tapped her pen against the legal pad. "The stronger approach is to file first. Control the narrative, establish your position before she has a chance to construct her own story." "How quickly can we file?" "I can have papers ready by Monday if you're certain this is the direction you want to pursue." I thought about Jennifer, currently checked into a hotel under the guise of professional development, lying to me from 90 minutes away, maintaining deceptions that required constant effort and zero conscience. The woman I'd married wouldn't have done this, but the woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and wasn't sure I'd ever really known. "I'm certain," I said. Walsh outlined the process. Petition for dissolution of marriage, financial affidavits, temporary orders regarding property and assets. She'd file everything on Monday morning, arrange for Jennifer to be served at work, establish legal parameters before Jennifer understood what was happening. "One more thing," Walsh said. "The dashcam footage, the phone records, the documentation you've gathered. That's excellent preparation. But be very careful about how you've obtained this information. If your wife claims you've violated her privacy, it could complicate things." "The dashcam is in her car," I said, "which is titled in both our names. The phone is in our house in a shared space. The bank accounts are joint. I haven't accessed anything that wasn't legally mine to access." "Good. Keep it that way. Document everything, but don't do anything that could be construed as stalking or harassment. We want her deception to be the story, not your investigation." I left Walsh's office with a timeline and a plan. Monday, she'd file the papers. Tuesday, Jennifer would be served. By Wednesday, everyone she'd lied to would know the truth, and the carefully constructed fiction of her life would collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. Jennifer came home Friday evening as promised, carrying her suitcase and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who thought they'd successfully managed a complicated deception. She talked about the conference, about connections she'd made, about insights she'd gained, all fiction, all delivered with the confidence of someone who'd told the same lies enough times that they'd started to feel true. "I'm exhausted," she said after dinner. "These trips always wipe me out." "You should rest." "I will, but first, I want to talk about something." My stomach tightened. "Okay." She sat across from me, hands folded on the table, expression serious. "I've been thinking about us, about our relationship, and I feel like we've been drifting apart lately." The projection was stunning. She was conducting an affair and accusing me of creating distance. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You seem distracted, preoccupied, like you're somewhere else even when you're here. I worry that you're not happy." "I'm fine, Jennifer." "Are you?" She reached across the table, took my hand. "Because if something's wrong, if there's something we need to address, I want to know. I want us to be okay." The manipulation was elegant. Flip the script, make me the problem, establish a narrative where her affair was somehow a response to my emotional absence. If I confessed to unhappiness, she'd use it to justify her behavior. If I insisted everything was fine, she'd claim I was lying, being evasive, proving her point about our disconnection. "I think we're okay," I said carefully. Every marriage has rough patches. We're just going through one of those periods where work and life get overwhelming. Maybe we should see a counselor, Jennifer suggested. Someone who could help us communicate better. Do you think we need that? I think it couldn't hurt. I want to make sure we're being honest with each other, that we're not letting small problems become big ones. The irony of her advocating for honesty while sitting across from me after 3 days at a hotel with another man was almost too much to process without laughing, but I kept my expression neutral, thoughtful, like I was seriously considering her proposal. Let me think about it, I said. Of course. No pressure. I just want you to know I'm committed to making this work. She squeezed my hand, smiled, and went upstairs. I sat at the table, staring at the place where her hand had been, wondering what level of cognitive dissonance allowed someone to advocate for marriage counseling while actively destroying the marriage. My phone buzzed. A text from Walsh. Papers will be ready Monday, 9 a.m. Confirm you want to proceed. I typed back, confirmed. The weekend passed in a surreal imitation of normal married life. Jennifer suggested we spend Saturday together, just the two of us, reconnecting. We went to the farmer's market, bought vegetables we'd probably never cook, shared a sandwich from a food truck. She laughed at my jokes, kissed me in public, played the role of devoted wife with an enthusiasm that would have been touching if it weren't so completely fabricated. Sunday morning, I woke up to find her side of the bed empty. Downstairs, the coffee maker was running, and Jennifer sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. Not her regular phone. The burner phone. She had it out in the open, completely comfortable, completely unaware that I'd been checking it every Saturday for the past month. I must have made a noise because she looked up, startled, and immediately dropped the phone face down on the table. You're up early, she said. Couldn't sleep? What's that? Work phone. The company issued them to the international team for security reasons. Security reasons. Yeah, because we're dealing with overseas contacts, sensitive information. It's a whole thing. She stood, slipped the phone into her pocket. Coffee's ready. Want some? Sure. She poured 2 cups, handed me one, and steered the conversation toward plans for the day. But I'd seen what I needed to see. She'd gotten comfortable enough to bring the burner phone out in my presence, confident enough in her deceptions that she thought a simple explanation would satisfy my curiosity. Monday morning arrived with Jennifer leaving for work at her usual time, kissing me goodbye, reminding me she had a late meeting and wouldn't be home until after 7. I waited an hour after she left, then drove to Walsh's office. The petition for dissolution was 15 pages of legal language outlining irreconcilable differences, requesting equitable division of assets, and citing Jennifer's financial deception as grounds for careful scrutiny of all marital property. Walsh had included exhibits, bank statements showing the suspicious transfers, screenshots of the dash cam footage with timestamps and locations, a timeline of Jennifer's fabricated work trips. The server will deliver this to her office at noon, Walsh said. She'll be served publicly, which may be embarrassing, but it also prevents her from claiming she never received the documents. What happens after she's served? She'll have 28 days to respond. During that time, both parties are restricted from making major financial changes or disposing of assets. I've also requested temporary orders freezing joint accounts pending full financial disclosure. I signed the papers, initialed each exhibit, and authorized Walsh to proceed. By lunch, Jennifer would know. By evening, the narrative she'd constructed would begin its collapse. I went to my office and tried to focus on work. Client briefs, contract reviews, routine tasks that felt absurd in their normalcy. At 12:15, Walsh texted, "Served." She accepted the documents. No response from Jennifer. Not at 12:30, not at 1, not at 2. The silence was telling. She was probably in shock, maybe consulting with her own lawyer, definitely trying to understand how I'd discovered what she'd worked so hard to hide. At 3:47, my phone rang. Jennifer's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Tom, what is this? Her voice was tight, controlled, dangerous. What the hell is this? I filed for dissolution of marriage. You were served today. I know I was served. I'm asking why. Why would you do this without talking to me first? Like you talked to me before spending the last 3 months with someone else? Silence. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. David transferred to Atlanta 6 months ago, Jennifer. There's no Singapore expansion. There was no Chicago conference. And you've been using our joint accounts to fund whatever you're doing at the Riverside Inn every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. More silence. I could hear her breathing, could picture her standing somewhere in her office, papers in hand, mind racing to construct an explanation that would make this my fault somehow. You've been following me, she finally said. You've been spying on me, invading my privacy. That's sick, Tom. That's controlling behavior. I installed a dash cam in our car, our jointly owned vehicle. Everything I documented is from shared property and shared accounts. You don't get to claim privacy violations when you're stealing from our marriage. I haven't stolen anything. $4,000 in cash withdrawals from our savings. Multiple transfers you authorized without telling me. Money that's disappeared without explanation. That's theft, Jennifer, and it's all documented. You have no idea what you're talking about. Her voice was rising now, losing the controlled tone. You're making assumptions, jumping to conclusions based on incomplete information. If you'd just talked to me like an adult instead of playing detective, we could have avoided this. Talk to you? I repeated. Like I talked to you at dinner, and when you seated another man at the head of our table. Like I talked to you about your late meetings, your gym sessions, your work trips. Every conversation we've had for months has been based on your lies. There's nothing left to talk about. This is insane. You're destroying our marriage over paranoid fantasies. The marriage was already destroyed. I'm just making it official. She hung up. I set my phone on my desk and waited for the next move. It came an hour later. A text from Amanda, Jennifer's college roommate, the one who'd amplified Jennifer's stories at the birthday dinner. Tom, Jennifer is devastated. She's saying you've been emotionally abusive, that you've been controlling and paranoid for months. I know you're going through something difficult, but please think about what you're doing to her. I stared at the text, admiring the speed of Jennifer's counterattack. She'd been served 4 hours ago, and already she was constructing a victim narrative, recruiting allies, building a coalition of people who'd believe her version of events. Emotional abuse, controlling behavior, paranoid fantasies, all terms designed to shift focus from her actions to my reactions. I didn't respond to Amanda. Instead, I opened my email and composed a message to Walsh. Jennifer is claiming emotional abuse and controlling behavior to mutual friends. Please advise on how to document and counter this narrative. Walsh's response came quickly. Don't engage with friends or family. Don't defend yourself in social media or text conversations. Any communication from this point should go through me. She's trying to provoke you into angry responses she can use as evidence. Don't give her ammunition. I followed the advice. When my phone buzzed with texts from people I barely knew, mutual acquaintances Jennifer had recruited to her cause, I didn't respond. When she called that evening, I let it go to voicemail. When she showed up at our house at 8 p.m., I watched through the window as she sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before finally leaving. The next morning, Walsh called with an update. Jennifer's lawyer contacted me, she said. They're requesting an emergency hearing to contest the account freeze, claiming you've left her without access to funds. She has a credit card in her name only, and she's been withdrawing cash for months. She has money. I know, but she's arguing that you've trapped her financially, that you're using the legal system to control her. The judge will see through it, but we need to be prepared for her to escalate. What kind of escalation? Protective orders, claims of domestic violence, allegations that she fears for her safety. She's building a narrative where you're the aggressor and she's the victim. It's a common tactic when someone knows they're going to lose on the merits. I thought about Jennifer, the woman who'd seated her affair partner at our dinner table, who'd lied about her job, her boss, her entire life for months. The same woman was now claiming to fear me, to need protection, to be a victim of my controlling behavior. What do I do? I asked. Exactly what you've been doing. Document everything, respond to nothing, let her destroy her own credibility. She's going to make mistakes. Liars always do. Our job is to be ready when she does. The mistakes came faster than I expected. That afternoon, Amanda posted a vague status on social media about supporting friends through difficult times, about believing victims, about standing against manipulation and control. Within hours, the post had dozens of comments from people I'd never met, people who knew nothing about the situation but felt qualified to judge me based on Jennifer's narrative. I didn't respond, didn't engage, didn't defend myself. Walsh had been clear. Silence was strategy. Engagement was weakness. That evening, sitting in our house that felt more like a stage set than a home, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "You deserve to know." Inside was a photograph. Jennifer and the man from the dashcam footage, sitting in a restaurant I didn't recognize, holding hands across the table. The image quality suggested it had been taken from a distance, possibly by another diner, possibly by someone who knew what they were documenting. Below the photo, a brief message. This was 3 weeks ago. I thought you should have evidence since she's telling everyone you're crazy. You're not crazy. She's just a liar. No signature, no identifying information. I saved the photo, forwarded it to Walsh, and added it to the growing file of documentation that proved Jennifer's affair wasn't paranoid fantasy but documented reality. My phone buzzed. Another text from Amanda, this one more aggressive. Jennifer told me what you did. Installing cameras, tracking her, going through her things. That's stalking, Tom. What you're doing is illegal and abusive. You need to stop before you destroy both of your lives. I screenshot the text, sent it to Walsh, and blocked Amanda's number. The campaign against me was intensifying, which meant Jennifer was scared. Scared people made mistakes, and I was counting on Jennifer to make enough mistakes that the truth would emerge despite her best efforts to bury it. Wednesday morning brought the emergency hearing Walsh had predicted. We sat in a courtroom that smelled like floor polish and institutional coffee, waiting for the judge to hear arguments about the account freeze. Jennifer arrived with her lawyer, a man in his 60s who specialized in contentious divorces. She'd dressed carefully, professional, but vulnerable, the outfit of someone who wanted to appear both competent and sympathetic. She didn't look at me, kept her eyes fixed on her lawyer or the judge, playing the role of someone too traumatized to acknowledge my presence. Her lawyer argued that I'd frozen accounts without warning, leaving Jennifer unable to access funds for basic living expenses. He characterized the dashcam as surveillance equipment installed without Jennifer's knowledge, the documentation as evidence of obsessive tracking, the entire dissolution petition as the action of a controlling spouse who couldn't accept his wife's professional success. Walsh countered with bank statements showing Jennifer's cash withdrawals, the timeline of her fake business trips, the documentation proving David had transferred offices 6 months before Jennifer claimed to be working with him. She presented everything calmly, factually, letting the evidence speak without editorial commentary. The judge reviewed the documents in silence, her expression neutral. Finally, she looked up. Mrs. Reeves, can you explain these cash withdrawals? Jennifer's lawyer started to respond, but the judge held up a hand. I'd like to hear from Mrs. Reeves directly. Jennifer stood, her voice steady. I was planning a surprise for my husband, an anniversary trip. I'd been saving cash so the expense wouldn't appear on our joint statements and ruin the surprise. An anniversary trip costing $4,000 in cash? We've always wanted to go to Hawaii. I was saving gradually, planning to book flights and hotels once I had enough. The lie was smooth, practiced, almost believable. Except our anniversary had been 2 months ago, celebrated with takeout and a movie because Jennifer claimed to be too busy with work for elaborate plans. Walsh stood. Your Honor, the dates of these withdrawals don't align with the Reeves' anniversary. Additionally, the travel story doesn't explain the hotel visits documented in the dashcam footage, visits that occurred during supposed business trips. The dashcam was installed without my knowledge, Jennifer said. My husband has been tracking my movements, monitoring my activities, exhibiting controlling behavior that's made me fear for my safety. The dashcam was installed in a vehicle owned jointly by both parties, Walsh countered. Mr. Reeves had every legal right to document activity involving shared property. The judge made notes, her pen scratching across the legal pad. I'm going to maintain the account freeze pending full financial disclosure from both parties. Mrs. Reeves, you indicated you have access to personal funds. That should be sufficient for living expenses during this temporary period. We'll revisit the financial situation at the next hearing once both parties have submitted complete documentation. Jennifer's lawyer objected, but the judge had already moved to the next case. We filed out of the courtroom, Walsh guiding me toward the exit while Jennifer and her lawyer huddled in conversation behind us. In the parking garage, Walsh reviewed the results. She hurt herself today, Walsh said. The Hawaii story doesn't hold up, and claiming to fear you while simultaneously demanding access to joint funds sends mixed messages. The judge is skeptical, which is what we need. What happens next? Financial discovery. Both of you will disclose all accounts, assets, debts, income sources. If Jennifer has a hidden account, we'll find it. If she's been moving money, we'll trace it. The more she tries to hide, the worse this gets for her. I drove home through afternoon traffic, thinking about Jennifer's performance in court, the careful balance between victim and professional, vulnerable and competent. She was good at this, better than I'd expected, but being good at lying wasn't the same as being good at sustaining lies under scrutiny. That evening, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mr. Reeves, this is Detective Patterson with the police department. I'd like to ask you some questions about a harassment complaint we received. My stomach dropped. Harassment complaint? Your wife filed a report claiming you've been following her, installing surveillance equipment, and engaging in behavior that's made her feel unsafe. I'd like to hear your side of the story. I explained the dash cam, the jointly owned vehicle, the dissolution proceedings. Detective Patterson listened without interrupting, his tone neutral. Do you have documentation showing joint ownership of the vehicle? He asked. Yes, the title is in both our names. And the dashcam was installed for what purpose? To document my wife's activities during a period when she was claiming to be at work locations and business trips that I'd discovered were fabricated. So you suspected her of infidelity? I suspected her of lying about her location and activities. The infidelity became apparent once I had documentation. Detective Patterson was quiet for a moment. Mr. Reeves, I understand you're going through a difficult divorce, but installing tracking devices, even on shared property, can constitute stalking under Ohio law if it's done to harass or intimidate someone. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but I want you to be aware of how this could be interpreted. I'm aware. My attorney has advised me on the legal boundaries of documentation during dissolution proceedings. Good. Keep working with your attorney. And Mr. Reeves, don't install any more surveillance equipment, don't follow your wife, don't do anything that could be construed as monitoring her activities. Even if you think you're within your legal rights, it's not worth the potential criminal charges. He hung up. I sat in my car, hands shaking, understanding that Jennifer had escalated beyond narrative warfare into actual legal threats. The harassment complaint was strategic, establishing a paper trail that would support her victim story, creating documentation that could be used against me if I continued investigating her activities. I called Walsh, explained the detective's call. This is good news, she said. How is this good news? Because she's overplaying her hand. Filing a police report when there's no actual harassment, when the only surveillance was a dash cam in a jointly owned vehicle, makes her look desperate. It shows she's willing to weaponize law enforcement to support a false narrative. That doesn't play well with judges. The detective said I could face criminal charges. You won't. You haven't done anything illegal. But take his advice seriously. No more investigation. We have enough documentation. Let Jennifer keep escalating. Let her keep making moves that reveal her tactics. Every aggressive action she takes, every false claim she makes, undermines her credibility. I wanted to believe her, but sitting in my car, shaking from the realization that my wife had tried to get me arrested for discovering her affair, belief felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. The financial discovery deadline arrived on a Tuesday. Both Jennifer and I were required to submit complete documentation of all assets, accounts, income sources, and debts accumulated during the marriage. I'd spent a week compiling records, working with Walsh to ensure everything was accurate and complete. Jennifer's submission arrived by courier at 4:47 p.m., 3 minutes before the deadline. Walsh called me immediately after reviewing it. She's claiming there's a separate account we don't know about, Walsh said. An inheritance from her grandmother, kept separate from marital assets, totaling approximately $60,000. Jennifer's grandmother died 4 years ago. I remember the funeral. There was no inheritance. According to these documents, the inheritance was held in trust until Jennifer turned 30. She accessed it 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Right when David supposedly transferred to Atlanta. Right when Jennifer's behavior started changing, when the late meetings began, when the fabricated stories intensified. This is new information, I said. Very new and convenient. An inheritance would be separate property, not subject to division in the divorce. But if she's lying about the source of the funds, if this money came from somewhere else, it changes everything. How do we verify it? I've already requested documentation of the trust, contact information for the trustee, and death certificates proving the inheritance claim. She has 72 hours to provide supporting evidence. The 72 hours passed without response. On Friday, Walsh filed a motion to compel, requesting a court order forcing Jennifer to produce the documentation she'd claimed existed. Jennifer's lawyer requested an extension, citing difficulty obtaining records from the supposed trustee. The judge denied the extension. Monday morning brought a different development. Walsh's paralegal discovered something during a routine public records search. Jennifer had filed articles of incorporation 4 months earlier, establishing a small business under a name that meant nothing to me. Catalyst Consulting, LLC. The business has no website, no public presence, no apparent clients, Walsh explained, but it has a bank account with deposits totaling approximately $45,000 over the past 3 months. Where did the money come from? That's what we're going to find out. I've subpoenaed the bank records. We should have them by Wednesday. Wednesday brought answers I hadn't expected. The deposits to Catalyst Consulting came from a single source, a company called Highland Properties Management. Walsh traced Highland Properties to a real estate investment firm operating in Cincinnati, managing rental properties and commercial leases throughout southern Ohio. Highland Properties is owned by someone named Jason Brenner, Walsh said. Does that name mean anything to you? No. He's 34, divorced, owns a construction company in addition to the property management firm. Successful, according to public records. Also, he drives a silver sedan registered to Highland Properties. The silver sedan from the dash cam footage. The car that had parked next to Jennifer's at the Riverside Inn. The man who'd walked her into the hotel, who'd spent afternoons with her while she lied about conferences and late meetings. Why is he paying Jennifer's company $45,000? I asked. That's the interesting part. I contacted Highland Properties, pretending to be a vendor checking on an invoice. They have no record of any contract with Catalyst Consulting, no services rendered, no legitimate business relationship. The payments appear to be personal, not corporate. So he's been giving her money. Substantial amounts. But here's where it gets complicated. Jennifer claimed the $60,000 in her account came from an inheritance. But if $45,000 actually came from Brenner, and she's misrepresenting the source, that's fraud. And if she established a shell company to receive the funds, that's money laundering. Can we prove that? We can prove the payments from Brenner. We can prove the shell company has no legitimate business operations, and we can demonstrate that Jennifer lied about the inheritance when she has no documentation to support her claim. Put it all together, and we have a pattern of deception that goes beyond simple infidelity. Walsh filed an emergency motion to freeze the Catalyst Consulting account and requested a hearing to address Jennifer's fraudulent financial disclosure. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. Thursday afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered, expecting another detective or maybe one of Jennifer's recruited friends. Mr. Reeves, this is Barbara Sullivan. I'm Jennifer's mother. I'd met Barbara exactly 3 times during our marriage. Jennifer kept her family at a distance, claimed they didn't understand her life, her choices, her ambitions. Now her mother was calling me directly, which suggested Jennifer's narrative was fragmenting faster than she could control it. Hello, Barbara. I need to know what's happening with my daughter. She's telling me you've been abusive, that you've frozen her out of your finances, that she's afraid of you. But I've also heard from some of her friends that there might be more to the story. What do you want to know? The truth, whatever it is. I'm tired of Jennifer's versions of events. I want to hear yours, I told her. Not everything, but enough. The dinner with the fictional boss, the burner phone, the fake conferences, the hotel visits, the money from Jason Brenner, the lies upon lies upon lies that had constructed a parallel life I'd only discovered through investigation. Barbara was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then, she told me David was her boss. She said he was mentoring her, helping her advance in the company. She sent me pictures from their dinner at your house. David transferred to Atlanta 6 months ago. Jennifer's been lying about him to cover for someone else. Jason, Barbara said quietly. She mentioned someone named Jason months ago. Said he was a business contact, someone helping her explore entrepreneurial opportunities. I thought it was legitimate. It might have started that way, but it evolved into something else. And the money? The inheritance she claims she received? There's no inheritance. The money came from Jason, paid through a shell company Jennifer created. She's been lying about the source to protect it in the divorce. Barbara's breathing was shaky. I thought she was finally getting her life together. She seemed so confident, so focused. I didn't realize it was all built on deception. Neither did I. What happens now? Tomorrow there's a hearing. The truth comes out one way or another. Friday morning, the courtroom was more crowded than I'd expected. Jennifer arrived with her lawyer, looking pale and nervous in a way I hadn't seen during previous hearings. Barbara sat in the back row, her presence clearly surprising Jennifer, whose expression shifted from nervous to panicked when she saw her mother. The judge reviewed the motions, the financial documentation, and the evidence Walsh had compiled. Jennifer's lawyer tried to argue that the Catalyst consulting payments were legitimate business income, that Jennifer had been consulting on real estate projects, that the money was earned compensation for services rendered. What services specifically? The judge asked. Jennifer's lawyer fumbled through a response about market analysis and development consulting. The judge requested documentation, contracts, work product, communications establishing the business relationship. Jennifer's lawyer admitted they didn't have formal contracts, that the relationship was informal based on verbal agreements. Mrs. Reeves, the judge said, you claimed under penalty of perjury that the funds in your account came from an inheritance. Do you have documentation supporting that claim? Jennifer stood, hands clasped in front of her. I was trying to protect my privacy. The money came from a personal relationship, and I didn't want it disclosed during the divorce because it's not marital property. A personal relationship with Jason Brenner? Yes. Who paid you $45,000 through a shell company you created specifically to receive the payments? He was helping me start a business. The payments were investments in my future. Do you have documentation showing this was a business investment rather than personal gifts? We didn't formalize everything. It was based on trust. The judge made notes, her expression skeptical. Mrs. Reeves, you filed financial disclosure documents claiming an inheritance that doesn't exist. You created a shell company to receive payments from a man you were having a relationship with, and you failed to disclose this income as marital property despite it being received during the marriage. These are serious misrepresentations. Jennifer's lawyer requested a recess. The judge denied it. I'm ordering the Catalyst Consulting account frozen pending investigation into whether these funds constitute marital property or gifts that should have been disclosed. I'm also referring this matter to the court's Fraud Investigation Division to determine if Mrs. Reeves's financial disclosure constitutes perjury. Jennifer sat down heavily, her face ashen. Barbara watched from the back row, her expression unreadable. The hearing concluded with temporary orders maintaining the account freezes and requiring both parties to submit to depositions regarding all financial matters. As we left the courtroom, I saw Barbara approach Jennifer in the hallway. Their conversation was brief, tense, ending with Barbara walking away while Jennifer stood alone, watching her mother leave. That evening, Walsh called with another update. Jennifer's lawyer contacted me. She wants to negotiate a settlement. Based on what? She's willing to waive claims to the Catalyst Consulting funds if you agree to an expedited dissolution with no fault assigned to either party. She wants to quietly walk away with $45,000 she fraudulently hid. Essentially, yes. Her lawyer is characterizing it as a path toward quick resolution, avoiding further litigation costs and public disclosure of personal matters. What do you recommend? I recommend we reject the offer and proceed with depositions. She's cornered, desperate to avoid further scrutiny, which means there's more we haven't discovered yet. The depositions will force her to answer questions under oath, and given her track record of lying, she's likely to commit perjury or reveal additional deceptions. Proceed with depositions. The depositions were scheduled for the following week. Jennifer went first, sitting across from Walsh in a conference room while a court reporter documented every word. I watched via video feed, observing Jennifer's body language as Walsh walked through the timeline of her deceptions. When did you meet Jason Brenner? Walsh asked. About 8 months ago, at a professional networking event. What was the nature of your relationship initially? Professional. He was interested in my expertise regarding market analysis. Your expertise. What qualifies you to provide market analysis for real estate development? Jennifer hesitated. I have a background in business. I understand market dynamics. Your degree is in communications, correct? And you work in corporate marketing, not market analysis or real estate? I'm capable of learning new fields. Of course. So you met Jason Brenner, who needed market analysis despite owning a successful real estate company with presumably his own analysts, and he decided to pay you $45,000 for this expertise you'd acquired. How exactly? Through research, through conversations with Jason about his business needs. These conversations occurred where? Various places. Restaurants, coffee shops, his office. The Riverside Inn? Jennifer's face flushed. Sometimes, yes. How many times did you meet Jason Brenner at the Riverside Inn? I don't remember exact numbers. More than 5 times? Probably. More than 10? Maybe. Mrs. Reeves, I have dashcam footage showing your vehicle at the Riverside Inn parking lot on 14 separate occasions over a 3-month period. Do you dispute that documentation? The footage doesn't show what happened inside the hotel? That's correct. But combined with your calendar entries, the burner phone communications, and the cash withdrawals from joint accounts, it establishes a pattern of deception regarding your location and activities during your marriage. Would you disagree with that characterization? Jennifer's lawyer objected to the phrasing. Walsh rephrased, asked the same question more directly. Jennifer admitted to meeting Jason at the hotel, admitted the meetings weren't purely professional, admitted that their relationship had evolved beyond business discussions. When did the relationship become romantic? Walsh asked. I don't know that I'd characterize it that way. How would you characterize receiving $45,000 from a man you were meeting at hotels while lying to your husband about your location? Another objection, another rephrase. The dance continued for 4 hours, Jennifer squirming through questions about David, about the fake conferences, about the burner phone, about every lie she'd constructed and maintained over months of careful deception. By the end, Jennifer looked exhausted, defeated, trapped by her own contradictory statements. Walsh had gotten her to admit the affair, admit the financial deceptions, admit the fabricated stories about work and travel. Everything was on record now, sworn testimony that couldn't be walked back or explained away. My deposition was shorter, mostly Walsh walking me through the timeline of discovery, how I'd found each piece of evidence, what had prompted me to investigate initially. I explained the birthday dinner, the inconsistencies in Jennifer's stories, the burner phone and the protein powder. I kept my responses factual, unemotional, letting the documentation speak for itself. When we finished, Walsh seemed satisfied. "She hurt herself badly today," Walsh said. "The contradictions, the admissions, the clear timeline of deception. The judge will see through any attempt to claim you were controlling or abusive. Jennifer constructed an elaborate fraud, and she's documented every step of it herself." What happens next? We wait for Jennifer's next move. She can either accept a settlement on our terms, or we proceed to a full hearing where all of this becomes public record. Either way, her credibility is destroyed. The next move came Sunday evening. A text from an unknown number containing only a link to a social media post. I opened it to find Jennifer's public confession, a long statement about making mistakes, losing herself in unhealthy patterns, and seeking help to address personal failings. She apologized to everyone she'd hurt, acknowledged that her behavior had been wrong, and asked for privacy while she worked on becoming a better person. The post had dozens of comments, mostly supportive, mostly from people who appreciated her honesty and vulnerability. No mention of the fraud, no mention of the hidden money, no mention of the specific deceptions she'd committed. Just a vague admission of unnamed mistakes, crafted to generate sympathy while avoiding actual accountability. I screenshot the post, sent it to Walsh. "Expected," Walsh replied. "She's trying to control the narrative publicly while the legal process continues privately. Ignore it. What matters is what happens in court, not what happens on social media." Tuesday brought the final settlement offer. Jennifer would waive all claims to marital assets except her personal property and her car. She'd accept responsibility for her own debts, including her credit cards and the Catalyst consulting account obligations. In exchange, I'd agree to a no-fault dissolution, no public disclosure of the fraud or affair, and no pursuit of criminal charges related to her financial misrepresentations. "She's giving up a lot," Walsh noted. "The house, retirement accounts, shared investments. She's essentially walking away with nothing except her clothes and her car. And $45,000 from Jason Brenner, which we can't touch because it was paid to her company, not directly to her. It's technically separate property, even if she obtained it through fraudulent means. So she benefits from her own fraud. In a limited way. But she loses everything else, including her reputation. Most people in a dissolution get half the marital assets. She's getting maybe 10%. That's a significant consequence. I want the deposition testimony entered into public record, I said. That's aggressive. It would essentially destroy her professional reputation, make it difficult for her to find employment, follow her indefinitely. She filed a police report claiming I was harassing her. She told mutual friends I was abusive. She tried to have me arrested for discovering her affair. She doesn't get to quietly walk away like none of that happened. Walsh was quiet for a moment. "You're sure about this? Because once we make the depositions public, there's no walking it back. Everyone will know exactly what she did, and that information becomes permanent public record." "I'm sure." "Then I'll reject the settlement and file a motion to enter all deposition testimony into the final dissolution record." The motion was filed Wednesday. Jennifer's lawyer called Thursday, requesting an emergency conference. Walsh refused. Friday brought another settlement offer, this one even more favorable to me. Jennifer would waive all claims to everything, including future earnings and potential inheritances. She'd accept full responsibility for the fraudulent financial disclosures. She'd agree to a stipulation stating that all marital assets would go to me as a consequence of her deception. "She's desperate," Walsh said. "She knows the deposition testimony will destroy her, and she's willing to give up everything to prevent it from becoming public. What would you recommend? Professionally? This is an excellent settlement. You get everything you're entitled to and more. Personally, I understand wanting justice, wanting accountability, but revenge and justice aren't always the same thing. I thought about Jennifer, sitting in the deposition, squirming through questions about her lies. I thought about her public apology, the carefully crafted statement that admitted nothing specific. I thought about the police report, the harassment complaint, the attempt to have me arrested for discovering the truth. Enter the depositions into public record, I said. Then accept her final settlement offer." Walsh paused. "You want both? Public disclosure and the settlement?" "She doesn't get to choose which consequences she faces. She gets all of them." Monday morning, the final hearing convened. The judge reviewed the settlement terms, noted the deposition testimony being entered into public record, and asked Jennifer if she understood and accepted the terms. Jennifer stood, her voice barely audible. "I understand." "And you're accepting full responsibility for the financial deceptions that led to these settlement terms?" Yes, Your Honor. The judge signed the dissolution decree. 8 years of marriage ended with a signature and a gavel strike. Jennifer left the courtroom without looking at me, her lawyer guiding her toward the exit while she kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Barbara approached me in the hallway outside. I read the deposition testimony, she said. All of it. I'm sorry for what my daughter put you through. Thank you. She's always been good at creating stories, at making herself the center of whatever narrative she constructs. But this time, the story fell apart. Barbara handed me an envelope. This is for you. Letters she wrote to Jason, ones I found in her apartment when I helped her pack. I thought you should have them as evidence of who she really became. I accepted the envelope without opening it. What will she do now? I don't know. She's lost her job, lost most of her friends, lost her marriage. The deposition testimony is public record, searchable by any future employer or romantic partner. She built herself a prison out of lies, and now she has to live in it. Barbara walked away, leaving me standing in the courthouse hallway with an envelope full of letters I'd probably never read. The details didn't matter anymore. The specific words, the promises, the justifications Jennifer and Jason had exchanged were just variations on a theme I already understood. People lied when the truth became inconvenient, and they kept lying until the weight of the deceptions crushed whatever foundation they'd been standing on. I walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunlight, breathing air that felt different somehow, lighter without the weight of Jennifer's secrets pressing down on everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Walsh. The dissolution decree is filed and recorded. You're officially no longer married. Congratulations on your freedom. Freedom. The word felt accurate, but incomplete. I wasn't free, not really. I was just alone, standing in a courthouse parking lot, holding letters from my ex-wife to her affair partner, trying to figure out what came next. The answer, I realized, was whatever I wanted to come next. For the first time in months, my life wasn't defined by someone else's deceptions. The future was mine to construct, and I could build it on truth instead of lies. I drove home, parked in the driveway of the house that was now solely mine, and sat there for a few minutes, letting the reality settle in. Jennifer was gone. The marriage was dissolved. The lies were exposed. Everything she'd tried to hide had become public record, permanent documentation of her choices and their consequences. Justice wasn't the same as revenge, Walsh had said. But sitting there in my driveway, looking at the house Jennifer would never enter again, I thought maybe in this case they'd ended up being the same thing after all. The house felt larger empty. Jennifer had removed her belongings over a weekend while I was deliberately absent, leaving behind only generic furniture and the ghost of routines we'd shared. I walked through rooms that had once felt cramped with two people's lives and found them hollow, echoing with absence. Monday morning I returned to work, fielding carefully neutral questions from colleagues who'd heard about the dissolution but didn't know the details. I kept my responses brief, professional, steering conversations back toward pending cases and upcoming deadlines. The senior partner mentioned that my billable hours had remained strong despite personal circumstances, a comment that seemed to suggest my partnership prospects remained intact. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Amanda, Jennifer's college roommate, the one who'd sent accusatory texts about my supposed controlling behavior. My assistant announced her, asking if I wanted the meeting. I considered refusing, then decided I'd rather hear whatever she'd come to say. Amanda sat across from my desk, looking uncomfortable in a way that suggested she knew this visit wasn't welcome. I read the deposition testimony, she said without preamble. It's public record now. Anyone can access it. That was the point. I owe you an apology. I believed Jennifer when she said you were abusive, when she claimed you were controlling and paranoid. I didn't question her story because we'd been friends for so long, and I thought I knew her well enough to trust her account of what was happening. You did know her, I said. You knew exactly who she was, someone who constructs narratives and expects everyone to accept them without question. That's not fair. Jennifer wasn't always like this. Wasn't she? Or did you just never see her when the performance didn't serve her purposes? Amanda flinched. The person I read about in those depositions, the one who created shell companies and lied to everyone, including her own family, that's not the Jennifer I thought I knew. Then you didn't know her at all. You knew the version she wanted you to see. Maybe. Amanda stood, uncertain whether the conversation was over. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions instead of just accepting her story. Yeah, you should have. She left, and I returned to the contract I'd been reviewing, trying to focus on adhesion clauses and liability limitations instead of the growing realization that Jennifer's circle was fracturing, that her carefully maintained friendships were collapsing under the weight of revealed truths. Friday afternoon, Walsh called with an update. Jennifer filed for bankruptcy, she said. Chapter 7, liquidating all non-exempt assets to discharge debts. What debts? She walked away from the marriage with minimal obligations. Credit cards, apparently. She maxed out every card she had access to over the past 2 weeks, approximately $40,000 in charges. Doing what? According to the bankruptcy filing, various personal expenses, clothing, hotels, travel. She went on a spending spree after the dissolution, presumably using the money Jason gave her to make payments until the cards were maxed, then filing bankruptcy to discharge the balances. That's fraud. Potentially. But proving she incurred the debts with intent to discharge them through bankruptcy requires demonstrating a pattern of deception, which, given her recent history, might actually be possible. The credit card companies will probably challenge the bankruptcy, argue that the charges were made in bad faith. What happens if they succeed? She'd be personally liable for the full amounts, plus legal fees and potential penalties. We're talking $50,000 to $60,000 in obligations she can't discharge, following her indefinitely until she pays them or settles. Good, I said, then immediately felt small for the satisfaction the word carried. There's something else, Walsh continued. Jason Brenner filed a lawsuit against Jennifer's company, Catalyst Consulting. He's claiming breach of contract, alleging that Jennifer was supposed to provide business services in exchange for the payments he made, and that she failed to deliver on any of the promised work. He's suing her for the money he gave her. Essentially, it's a transparent attempt to recover funds from a romantic relationship by recharacterizing them as business investments. But here's the interesting part. If he succeeds, if the court determines the payments were actually for services Jennifer never rendered, she'd owe him $45,000 plus interest and legal fees. Adding to the credit card debt and bankruptcy complications? Exactly. She's being crushed from multiple directions, each consequence building on the others, creating a cascade of legal and financial problems that she can't simply walk away from. I thought about Jennifer, who'd been so confident in her deceptions, who'd constructed elaborate lies because she believed she was smart enough to maintain them indefinitely. Now she was facing bankruptcy, lawsuits, credit card debt, and a permanent public record of her fraud, all consequences flowing directly from the choices she'd made. Is there anything I need to do? I asked Walsh. Nothing. These are Jennifer's problems now, separate from the dissolution proceedings. I just thought you'd want to know that the situation continues to deteriorate for her. Thanks for the update. I hung up and stared at the Morrison brief I was supposed to be finalizing, the words blurring together as I processed the information. Part of me felt vindicated, seeing Jennifer face consequences that matched the magnitude of her deceptions. Another part, smaller but persistent, felt something like pity for how completely she'd destroyed her own life. The weekend arrived empty of obligations. I spent Saturday cleaning the house, removing the last traces of Jennifer's presence, boxing up photographs and mementos that felt like documentation of someone else's marriage. Sunday, I drove to a furniture store and bought a new couch, new chairs, new dishes that didn't carry memories of dinner parties where other men sat in my place. Monday morning brought an email from Barbara, Jennifer's mother. I thought you should know Jennifer's moved to Arizona. She found a job at a marketing firm there, entry-level position that doesn't require the kind of background checks that would reveal the bankruptcy or the deposition testimony immediately. She's trying to start over somewhere people don't know her history. I don't expect you to care what happens to her, but I wanted you to know she's gone, in case it helps you move forward knowing she won't be showing up unexpectedly. Arizona. 2,000 miles away, far enough to escape the immediate consequences of her reputation, but not far enough to escape the public records that would follow her indefinitely. I wondered how long it would take for her new colleagues to discover the truth, whether she'd try to construct new lies or attempt to live honestly under the weight of her past. I replied with a brief thanks, acknowledging the information without commenting on Jennifer's relocation. Barbara's email had been thoughtful, providing closure without expecting forgiveness or reconciliation. I appreciated that. Tuesday afternoon, Kevin, Amanda's husband, stopped by my office. I hadn't seen him since the birthday dinner, since the night that had started this entire cascade of discovery and dissolution. I heard you and Jennifer split, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Amanda told me about the deposition, about what Jennifer had been doing. I wanted to apologize for that dinner, for how she positioned that David guy as someone important when apparently the whole thing was theater. You didn't know? No, but I should have seen it. The way she was performing, the way she kept steering conversations back to him like she was directing a play. I thought it was weird at the time, but I figured maybe she was just really into her career advancement. She was into something, just not career advancement. Kevin smiled grimly. Amanda's been beating herself up about believing Jennifer's version of events, about those texts she sent you calling you abusive and controlling. She's realized Jennifer played all of us, used her friendships as props to support whatever narrative she needed at any given moment. People believe their friends. It's natural. Maybe, but it's also lazy. We should have asked more questions, pushed back on some of the obvious inconsistencies. Instead, we just nodded along because it was easier than confronting the possibility that Jennifer was lying to everyone. We sat in silence for a moment, two men who'd been peripherally involved in someone else's deception, trying to make sense of how thoroughly Jennifer had manipulated the people around her. "What are you going to do now?" Kevin asked. "Work, live alone, figure out what comes next without someone else's lies defining the parameters." "That sounds healthy, actually. Better than what Jennifer's doing, from what Amanda tells me." "What's that?" "Apparently she's been posting on social media about her fresh start, about learning from mistakes, about becoming a better version of herself. All very inspirational and vague. No mention of the actual mistakes, of course, just generic acknowledgement that she's had challenges and is growing through adversity." "Of course she is." Kevin stood, extended his hand. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about all of this. You deserved better than what Jennifer put you through." We shook hands, and he left. I returned to work, to the contract reviews and legal briefs that had become refuge from the chaos of my dissolved marriage. The routine felt sustaining, the clear parameters of legal analysis providing structure when everything else felt uncertain. Wednesday morning, Walsh called one final time. "The bankruptcy challenge succeeded," she said. "The credit card companies demonstrated that Jennifer incurred the debts knowing she planned to discharge them through bankruptcy, which constitutes fraud under bankruptcy law. The court dismissed her Chapter 7 petition and converted it to Chapter 13, which means she's required to repay the debts over time through a structured payment plan." "How much?" "After fees and interest, approximately $63,000 over the next 5 years. The Jason Brenner lawsuit is also moving forward. He's likely to win, which would add another $45,000 to her obligations. We're looking at Jennifer owing over $100,000 in the next few years, on top of trying to rebuild her career in a new city with a public record that documents her fraud and deception." "That's a lot of consequences." "It is, and they're all self-inflicted, which is what makes this different from simple bad luck or circumstances beyond someone's control. Jennifer constructed this situation through deliberate choices, and now she's experiencing the full weight of those choices." "Is there anything else I need to know?" "Nothing. The dissolution is finalized, the property division is complete, and you're free to move forward without any remaining legal obligations to Jennifer. This chapter of your life is officially closed." I thanked Walsh for her work, ended the call, and sat at my desk looking at the city through my office window. Closed chapters, fresh starts, moving forward. The language of recovery and progress felt appropriate but incomplete. I wasn't recovering from Jennifer so much as emerging from the fog of her deceptions, seeing clearly for the first time in months what my life actually looked like without the distortion of her lies. Thursday evening, I went to dinner alone, choosing a restaurant Jennifer and I had never visited together, ordering food I'd never shared with her. The meal was unremarkable, the kind of ordinary experience that felt significant only because it represented a future without her presence. Friday afternoon brought one final piece of correspondence, an email from Jennifer, sent from a new address I didn't recognize. "Tom, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to say this. I'm sorry for what I put you through. I'm sorry for the lies, for the deception, for destroying what we had together. I know the apology doesn't fix anything, doesn't undo the damage, but I wanted you to know that I recognize what I did was wrong. I'm trying to be better, to learn from this, to make sure I never hurt anyone this way again. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Jennifer." I read the email 3 times, analyzing the word choices, the structure, the careful balance between admission and self-justification. The apology acknowledged wrongdoing without specifying the exact nature of the wrongs. The promise to be better implied the past behavior was an aberration rather than a pattern. The request for no forgiveness actually functioned as a subtle request for exactly that, positioning Jennifer as someone humble enough to not ask for what she clearly wanted. I didn't respond, didn't delete the email, didn't save it, just closed the window and returned to work. Jennifer's apology, like everything else about her, was a performance designed to serve her purposes. Accepting it would give her closure I wasn't interested in providing. Saturday morning, I woke up in a house that was entirely mine, in a life that was entirely mine, facing a future that was entirely mine to construct. The weight of that freedom felt less overwhelming than it had weeks earlier, less like an absence and more like possibility. I made coffee, read the news, planned my day around errands and tasks that had nothing to do with Jennifer or the dissolution or the consequences still cascading through her life in Arizona. The ordinariness felt significant, proof that life continued past trauma, past betrayal, past the collapse of what I'd thought was permanent. Sunday afternoon, Barbara called one last time. I wanted to update you on Jennifer, she said. She lost the job in Arizona. They ran a background check after her probationary period, found the deposition testimony, and terminated her employment. She's living with a friend now, working retail while she tries to figure out what comes next. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Barbara's tone was gentle, curious rather than accusatory. I don't know. Part of me thinks she's getting exactly what she deserves. Another part recognizes that watching someone's life collapse, even someone who hurt me, doesn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. That's because you're not cruel. Jennifer hurt you badly, but you're not built to take pleasure in her suffering. That's a good thing, even if it's uncomfortable. What will she do now? I don't know. Keep trying, probably. Make more mistakes. Hopefully learn from them eventually. Build something from the wreckage, if she can. She's my daughter, so I have to believe she's capable of change, even if the evidence suggests otherwise. I hope you're right. Me too. But either way, it's not your problem anymore. You've moved on, built a life without her, and that's what matters. We said goodbye, and I sat in my living room, in furniture Jennifer had never sat in, surrounded by a life she'd never be part of again. Barbara was right. Jennifer's future wasn't my problem anymore. Her consequences, her struggles, her attempts at redemption or reinvention belonged entirely to her now. The following Tuesday, I accepted the partnership offer my firm had been hinting at for months. The ceremony was small, professional, celebrating an achievement that felt simultaneously significant and ordinary. My colleagues congratulated me, asked about my plans for the future, treated me like someone whose personal life hadn't recently imploded in a public dissolution proceeding. That evening, sitting in my office with a new nameplate that read Thomas Reeves Partner, I thought about the path that had led here, the birthday dinner that revealed inconsistencies, the quiet inventory of Jennifer's deceptions, the documentation that built a case, the dissolution that became public record, the consequences that cascaded through Jennifer's life while I rebuilt mine. Justice and revenge weren't the same thing, Walsh had said, but maybe they didn't need to be. Maybe justice was simply the natural consequence of actions, the inevitable collapse of structures built on lies, the weight of truth asserting itself against the architecture of deception. Jennifer had constructed an elaborate fiction, and the fiction had eventually consumed her. I'd simply documented the collapse, ensured the truth became permanent record, and walked away from the wreckage. That wasn't revenge. That was accountability. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it, expecting spam or a wrong number. This is Jason Brenner. I know we've never met, but I wanted to reach out. I recently discovered the full extent of Jennifer's deceptions, realized that I wasn't the only person she was lying to. I'm sorry for my role in what you went through. I didn't know she was married when we started our relationship. By the time I found out, I was already emotionally invested, and I convinced myself the situation was more complicated than simple infidelity. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I regret my actions and their impact on your life. I stared at the message, trying to decide how to respond. Jason had been complicit in Jennifer's affair, had given her $45,000, had met her at hotels while she lied to me about conferences and business trips, but he'd also been lied to, manipulated, used as a tool in Jennifer's construction of a parallel life. I typed a response. I appreciate you reaching out. What Jennifer did wasn't entirely your fault, but you weren't entirely innocent either. I hope you've learned from this experience. I know I have. His response came quickly. I have. Expensive lesson, but a necessary one. I hope you're doing well. I am. Good luck with everything. I deleted the conversation thread and set my phone aside. Jason's apology, like Jennifer's, was a performance designed to alleviate his own guilt more than to genuinely acknowledge harm. But unlike Jennifer's carefully constructed email, Jason's message carried a note of authentic regret, an acknowledgement that he'd been both victim and perpetrator in the same story. The distinction mattered, even if I couldn't entirely articulate why. Thursday afternoon, I left work early and drove to the bank where I'd opened a personal account months earlier, during the height of the dissolution proceedings. The account had sat mostly dormant, holding only the minimum balance, waiting for a purpose I hadn't identified yet. I transferred half of the settlement proceeds from the joint account Jennifer had depleted and the marital assets I'd been awarded. The money represented 8 years of shared work, shared sacrifice, shared goals that had been revealed as unshared illusions. Converting it to individual property felt like the final administrative step in dissolving a marriage that had ended emotionally months before the legal proceedings began. The bank officer processing the transfer asked if I wanted to set up automatic savings, establish investment accounts, plan for retirement as a single person rather than part of a married couple. I declined for now, explaining I needed time to adjust to the new financial reality before making long-term decisions. Driving home through afternoon traffic, I thought about Jennifer in Arizona, working retail, facing debt collectors and lawsuit judgments, and the permanent public record of her fraud. I thought about Jason, paying lawyers to recover money he'd given her, learning the same lesson I'd learned about the cost of trusting someone who specialized in deception. The satisfaction I'd expected to feel at their suffering never fully materialized. Instead, I felt something closer to relief, the kind that comes from closing a door that should have been closed long ago. Jennifer's consequences belonged to her now, not to me. Jason's regrets were his to manage, not mine to absolve. Friday evening, I stood in my kitchen making dinner for one, a routine that had become comfortable rather than lonely. The house no longer echoed with absence, but rather settled into itself, a space defined by what it contained rather than what it lacked. My phone stayed silent. No texts from Jennifer's recruited friends, no calls from her family, no updates from Walsh about legal proceedings that had concluded weeks ago. The silence represented closure more effectively than any final conversation could have. Saturday morning brought rain, the kind of steady precipitation that discouraged outdoor plans and invited reflection. I spent the day organizing files, shredding documents related to the dissolution that I no longer needed to keep, creating space for whatever came next. Among the papers, I found the envelope Barbara had given me at the courthouse, the letters Jennifer had written to Jason. I'd never opened it, never read the specific words she'd used to justify her betrayal or the promises she'd made to someone who wasn't me. I held the envelope over the shredder, then paused. These letters were documentation, evidence, proof that what had happened was real rather than imagined. But they were also artifacts of someone else's relationship, private words I had no interest in reading. I shredded them without opening the envelope, watching the paper transform into thin strips that meant nothing, contained nothing, proved nothing. The letters had served their purpose by existing, by being offered as evidence of Jennifer's deceptions. Reading them would have added details without adding understanding. The shredder hummed, consuming the past, making space for the future. Sunday afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where my parents were buried, people who died before meeting Jennifer, before witnessing the marriage that had consumed 8 years of my life. I stood at their graves and told them about the dissolution, about the deceptions, about the justice that had emerged from exposure rather than revenge. They didn't answer, of course, but standing there in the quiet afternoon, I felt something shift, a release of weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The story was over. The consequences had cascaded. The truth had become permanent record. What remained was simply life, continuing past trauma, building towards something I couldn't yet see but could finally imagine. I left the cemetery as rain began again, gentle drops that fell without drama, without significance, just water returning to earth in the endless cycle of weather. The ordinariness felt appropriate, a reminder that even the most dramatic collapses eventually settled into routine, into the background noise of existence. Monday morning, I returned to work, to the partnership responsibilities I was still learning to navigate, to clients who knew nothing about my personal history and cared only about my professional competence. The separation between public and private felt healthy, protective, necessary. The week brought routine, the kind that had become comfortable rather than boring. Work filled days with clear objectives and measurable outcomes. Evenings offered space for reading, cooking, maintaining the